When Peter asked me to do this, he asked me the question first. Why do you open internationally? And I thought there were three reasons. I'm going to ask each of you, but one of them was conversion. Maybe you felt like you could make more money somewhere else. One of them was white space. Maybe you felt like you could grow more somewhere else. And one of them was the reason that mountaineers climb Mount Everest, which I just heard, is because it's there, because you like the challenge and the excitement. And I thought we might go across. Simon, what made you? Can you maybe introduce your business a little bit, what you're doing internationally, and talk to us a bit about why?
Sure. So I look after a business called The Alchemist. It's a bar and restaurant brand, pretty well established here in the UK, coming on for 15 years now, and 23 sites here in the UK. We opened a site in Berlin back in May of 23, so getting on for a year and a half out there now. Not really much further on with my German Duolingo, but certainly a bit further on in terms of understanding how the market works out there and starting to gear the business a little bit more keenly into a very different economy and a slightly different sort of user group. The reasons for that, pragmatic, really. Initially, we're private equity owned. Growth is baked into our business, obviously, and our ownership structure. Management team is here as charges of that private equity team, and we're required to grow the business. And we felt that sooner or later we were going to run out of white space here in the UK. We understood our business pretty well. We know that we need a big, fairly pumping metro environment. There are a finite number of those in this country. And we felt that sooner or later we were going to be asked that question, so we thought we'd try and get out in front of it. We started working on the project back in 2019. A little bit longer to get going than we might have initially anticipated. Not quite as long as New York, in fairness, but not far behind. And eventually got the doors open out there start of summer last year, and now starting to get a real sense of what could be achieved over there. We've had to be patient, as we were warned, and we were prepared to be. And it's a system that we're getting a little bit more to grips with. We're operating this site, which has been quite an interesting learning curve. Along with what we feel we can do in Germany, we're starting to explore other ways that we might sort of push out beyond the UK. We're at the back end now of our first franchise agreement, and we hope to have a site open out a little bit further east at the back end of next year.
Great. I like the phrase pumping metro environment, by the way. That's going to turn up in a Hawksmoor board meeting soon. Éadaoin, talk to us about White Rabbit.
Sure. So I'm Éadaoin, the COO of White Rabbit, founded in 2016. We're a hospitality incubator. Our main brands are Cricket, Island Poke, Lena Stores. We also started a hotel arm in 2021. Effectively, lots of landlords and hoteliers were contacting us, not too interested in doing their own F&B, and asked would we be interested in getting involved. So actually, interestingly enough, we just opened an 8-outlet hotel in Lisbon in the last 3 weeks, which has been quite fun. We've started our sort of international journey quite early. Lena Stores opened in Japan, of all places, back in 2022. And we also have franchise in France with Island Poke.
Amazing. And when the video was playing, by the way, I stood next to Clay, and he's like, 16,000 square foot, nice. He didn't mean nice in a good way, by the way. So if I phrase this question slightly unpleasantly, it'll be for that reason. But so, Velvet Taco started in a state, Texas, about the size of France, growing in a country already that's the size of a continent. Talk to us about your plan to expand in a country the size of Oregon.
So, as you saw, we're an international taco concept. We're privately held. We're PE-backed as well. Started in 2011. I joined in 2017 with 4 restaurants, so we've grown substantially since then. We had an event in 2021, late 2021, and part of our plan was international growth. We feel that our brand, it's part of our DNA. Our top-selling taco is a tikka marsala taco. And so we have a very strong international base of consumers. We have about 50 company-owned restaurants, so we're all company-owned. London is our first international franchise agreement, license agreement. We'll open in Soho with a couple of partners here. We felt very comfortable with the partners. We've been very selective. We spent a lot of time looking. Jonathan Knight and Sonny Cooner, two gentlemen here, our partners here, will be opening in Soho in the spring. They said March, so I'm going to hold them to that. Right down from the Devonshire, a couple of doors down. Evidently, it looks like a busy pub. So
I'm sure your taco joint will be exactly the same.
yeah, that's what they
as
said.
the Devonshire.
They showed me the Devonshire and said it'll be something like that. So, no, look, I mean, one of the things I'll tell you, and look, I'm the dumb American in the room, so I can tell you all about what's going on in the States. London is sexy. London is a mecca. When people from the States talk about London, I mean, my entire team is jealous that I am here. It is international. You have every country. I passed I went on walkabouts, and I saw every country represented and every nationality here, and people come here and they will see our brand. And so I look at it as a stepping stone for other expansion. And so really it's a way to get our brand out there and to make a statement. I'd rather come here because of the proximity to the States. It's a 7-hour flight. We speak the same language somewhat, although I learned some new words at a football, so not a soccer game, a football game last night. So I learned some interesting words, some I will not use. But you know, there is a familiarity. And you know, we feel that we can set up systems and processes and learn how we can continue to expand across the globe. And it's a great starting point. I mean, you have a beautiful country and a beautiful city here.
Thank you very much. I used one of those words, by the way, in our New York restaurant once, and our chief people officer, who's over there, reminded me not to do it every time I went to the States for a year after I did it. So. I'm interested in something you said. You've just opened in Lisbon. You said it was fun. You've just said people are jealous that you're here. London's a sexy country. Pumping metro something. My experience is that there are moments of getting things open internationally that are exactly what you said, right? It's fun, it's exciting, feels really, really rewarding and entrepreneurial. There are other moments, particularly getting started, that feel like swimming upstream. They're hard and difficult. Do you think you could just speak to, for people who kind of are thinking of going on that journey, speak to some of those kind of highs and lows of getting started? I mean, you're doing one of them now, so maybe we start with you, Éadaoin.
Sure. I mean, maybe best to talk about Japan because it's a whole other world over there. You know, actually doing the deal itself took more than a year and a half, just simply because we had to hire external advisors and sort of really train us on how to cope with the cultural aspects. So that was really interesting in itself. I think learning a lot from that was, you know, I have a really funny story that we had this occasion where they were asking us to put a strawberry salad on the menu. We said, strawberry salad, you know, that's kind of like something with balsamic vinegar you might find on Alina Store's dessert menu, but not quite on a starter. So they, rather than ask for it directly, they took us around to every food hall in Tokyo, and pretty soon we were next to a fridge with a strawberry salad inside. And this story continued for the whole day long, and I guess their way of approaching aspects like that is not entirely direct, it's always in a roundabout way, and just sort of plant the seed to get there. So big learning was definitely that. I think in growing internationally, one of the biggest challenges we had for Japan was that we were no longer allowed to travel. COVID shut everything down, yet we were still opening a restaurant, and that was hugely frightening. But what we did was internally we built this intranet system, so it was an internal sort of systems and processes to show them how to open Alina stores from scratch. So everything from how to build the perfect Negroni or how to roll the perfect dough. We ticked it all off, and that at least gave us some comfort. And when we showed up, it looked like Alina stores and it tasted like Alina stores, so that was pretty good. I guess pulling that back to the most recent opening in Lisbon, we did a ton of research. You know, it's a really interesting market. We've admired it for quite some time now, and it's really important to do the due diligence on the local market in terms of price point and what people want to see on the menu. It's very much Lisbon-based. We took Nuno Mendes, who's the poster boy of London and of Lisbon as well, back as one of our chefs to launch the space. But really interestingly, you know, there's a huge international audience in Lisbon, but it was important for us to also resonate with the local community, and that's through making sure there's items on the menu like lots of seafood, and also making sure that the price point was right so that the locals could feel it was accessible enough. So I guess just to sort of summarize, a huge amount of research required. Things go wrong all the time. You know, we were building in an old monastery that took 6 years to build. every week it had to stop because they found more bodies underground, whether they were monks or nuns or whatever the case was. It meant we had to stop in our tracks, and you have to be agile and you need to have enough cash to be able to cope with that as well. So I think it's important to be resilient as a team, but also in your business structures to be able to cope with that.
The monastery, if Simon's face while you were describing the monastery is horrific. Simon, how about you? What were the highs and lows of getting open?
I think that first point that everyone's touched on and you've spoke about as well of fun or energy that goes through the business. And we'd had that in our sort of first 4 or 5 years working together, where we're getting lots of sites open here in the UK, great jolts of energy going through the business, which is really important. We talked earlier on about the significance of staff retention at the moment, or not just at the moment, in general. Getting new sites open creates pathways for people, so that's really important, but it also brings with it a sort of flush of excitement and fun. From maybe a slightly more sort of selfish perspective, doing interesting work and doing things that you've not done before is really important. And that the challenge of doing something, I guess a bit like because it's there and how we're going to approach this and how we're going to take all of that sort of lived experience and talk to other people around us in the community and make that work for us. In terms of the challenges, I think it's really difficult to apply some of the thinking. Obviously, a lot of what we do here in the UK and over there is driven by data, and of course that goes to site location selection and really zeroing in on the space that you want to be trading in. But no matter how many times you visit another country, you're not going to be as connected with it as we are to a location that we think we might be able to make work in London, or maybe even just from understanding in Scotland or Wales. And what we've got here is a much bigger network of people to draw upon. So if we're approaching a new site in a city that we don't know, there are hundreds of people probably in this room who will be able to talk to about it. We didn't really have that luxury in Berlin for a lot of the reasons that you articulated earlier. We felt it was a good start point. It's an international city. English is really commonly spoken. Lots of visitors into it, so we thought we'd have a bit of a leg up in that regards. But it turns out, obviously, that you can't really replicate that local knowledge until you've been there and understood it a little bit more. And it's taken many visits for us to really get a handle on what we're doing well. And the data quite often backs that up. But what we can see firsthand by spending time in the environment is something you just can't get round, really. So it's patience, and I'm glad that we've stuck at it. I think there's onward opportunity for us. Wasn't necessarily expecting to see Germany bottom of the growth charts that were shown earlier in the forecasting, but we like a challenge. And I think just having that patience and making sure that you do what you can to understand that area in advance, but being prepared to accept the fact that you're never going to know it all from the outset, and you're going to have to roll with a few punches there.
Claire, you're obviously in the stage where it's more exciting, you're doing research, your friends are jealous, you're drinking pints in the Devonshire. The 0% Guinness in the Devonshire. How do you think about something that I'm sure we've all experienced, which is that tension between, on the one hand, delivering the brand with people that know it, who are tenured, who love the company, loyal to it, and on the other hand, localness, really understanding what a city is like, what the workforce is like. How have you approached that?
Yeah, I mean, super critical. Just as critical as it is for each one of your businesses here, I have to look at it the same way. This is still my brand. This is not, and even more critical, I don't want these guys, I don't know what the saying is, I don't want them to F it up here. Because in my mind, this is the starting point for an international expansion where someone from the Middle East will probably come here before they come to Dallas, Texas. Now, I'm in 8 different states in the U.S., but before they come to Chicago, they would probably come to London and check out the brand. So I want to make sure even more so that I've got great operating partners here, and I've turned down, I've been looking for partners now for 2 years, and have actually turned down several different folks in different countries besides just London, because it is that important. And it's important, look, this is our brand, regardless. This isn't just something that I'm never going to worry about again, and it's just I'm never going to hear about it. It is critical to our growth. It's critical to our reputation and our brand, even more so than probably many of the restaurants that I have in the U.S. And so it is important that we have great operators that not just believe in the brand, but are going to be there, that put their well-being, on the line. I'll second also, I was thinking about what you were saying. Many of you may be thinking about coming to the U.S. there's 50 states in the U.S. And going to New York or Chicago, there's two totally differences. Everyone wants to go to Chicago or Los Angeles or something. There are totally differences within the United States. Texas, I would go to Texas. Cost of labor is so. I'm not going to California. I'm not going to New York. I am in Chicago. But I would talk to people who live in those regions and find out the differences, the same way you would about Berlin. Talk to people who live in those areas. What's it like doing business in Chicago versus New York? I'll put my contact information up there. I'll talk to you about any of the states that I have restaurants in. It's a big difference. We are very bullish. I'm very bullish. But it is a big difference. There are 50 states. There are 50 Oregons.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with that, by the way. I mean, despite it sounding like Chicago and New York weren't a good idea, but, you know, we thought about exactly what you're talking in both regards, really. One was that shop window, you know, kind of talk about London as a global shop window relative to some of the other places you're in. You know, whenever we talk to people about Hawksmoor, I've been to your London store, I've been to your New York store. I'm vaguely aware that you have other things in other cities, but they never visit them. Yeah. And that was really important to us to like kind of put a flag in the ground. Yeah.
Flagship restaurants.
Yeah. But whenever people come to talk to me, like I'm thinking of opening, I'm thinking of New York. I'm like, why? And how broadly have you thought about, like Texas is often the place that people talk about, I think, is an amazing.
It's all about your strategy. If it's about planning a flagship and you want that place, you know, that is one of our challenges for international. I just opened in Miami, knowing that that's going to be a place where people will come and visit. I'm not in New York and I'm not in Los Angeles. They're difficult places to do business for me, and my P&L, I got to look at that. Whereas Dallas, I do 500 basis points better. I mean, it's a better place to do business. It's a better cost of business. It's a better labor market. We're based there, obviously. We're based in Dallas, Texas, but it's something to consider.
Hawksmoor Dallas is coming up.
Come on.
Éadaoin, could you talk to us about that tension of kind of like local and brand? How did you approach that? We heard the unbelievably complicated sounding kind of COVID monastery Lena thing, but if you think about maybe about the hotel in Portugal, are you trying to seed that with people who really kind of are from White Rabbit that you've worked with for a long time, British people going over, or are you working with local operators mostly?
Majority local operators, but we also have people that we've brought on board for quite a significant period in advance. So one, thankfully, contact I had from a previous business, she's the ace when it comes to everything people related, and she'd done a huge amount of stadium work for me on a previous company that I'd worked for, so it was great to have her. Similarly, in all of the countries that we work, we'll always have sort of best-in-class operators by our side. So in Japan, we have a permanent operations director there that acts as our kind of conduit. We need that too because, you know, he's a French guy, pâtissier by trade, and you know, speaks fluent Japanese, so understands their language, understands what we need to get across, and actually also understands the nuances around the culture and how to get that message best translated to them. Similarly, in France with Island Poke, we have a permanent operations director there, and all of our franchisee partners are ex-sushi shops, so they really understand how to deal with the product properly. So having that local knowledge and expertise, yeah, absolutely, 100% needed.
The penultimate thing I kind of wanted to touch on with you was the extent to which when you go somewhere new and you do something entrepreneurial and you learn how to make something work in a different environment, how much you kind of reverse engineer some of those learnings into your UK or maybe your American operations. Simon, you're doing something in a low growth, extremely high cost economy. What can we learn?
Yeah, so that's really interesting and quite timely. It's it's opportunity, isn't it? Because the nice thing is that you've got this, you've got a brand that you totally understand, you've engineered to death in the market that you started in. You're picking that brand up and it becomes a concept again to some regard. You've got the name above the door. Obviously, you need to do your primary thing the same, but you've actually got lots of opportunity within that to flex the operation and think about things in a slightly different way, in a way that you'd never be able to achieve here because everything's so established and you've got 1,000 or so employees to think about as you go along. So in Germany, we knew that we were stepping into a high-cost economy. The cost of labour is pretty significant. We could see all that, just rates of pay, national living wage, the associated costs of employment. We knew there'd be a bit of a trade-off in the P&L because actually business rates aren't a thing over there, as are. You can we felt anyway through the P&L that we could arrive at the same number through the same sort of sales levels. We'd just do it in a slightly different way. And really that came to bear quite hard. So we were running 50 to 60% labour in the first 3 or 4 months of opening while we got to grips with things. Obviously not terribly sustainable, and not something that we were able to do for the long term or wanted to do for the long term. So we started thinking about the operation a bit differently, where we could find some efficiencies through the way that we did our service style over there. And it worked really well. We got that margin down to something a little bit more familiar. And actually now we've got a piece of work that we've started to plug into some of our sites that have struggled a little bit from a revenue perspective here in the UK. Little tweaks that we know have an effect without really changing the guest experience, that then start to feed through in more useful terms to us as we continue to struggle with high employment costs here.
Yeah, I mean, similar to what you've just said, I think we would look to do similar across all parts of what we do. And I think it's all about looking into the resource that you've got there to be able to channel the different issues that you've got at the local market. So in Lisbon, for example, one of the key aspects you have is really high employer tax. And to combat that, you really need to look at shift patterns and how you control your labour costs across the board. So lots of due diligence on that in advance. There's also some key tips that you can look into how you add in additional benefits to be able to reduce the taxes for your employee and for yourselves. So yeah, tapping into that was really useful. I guess with the franchisee partners, it's more sitting in their remit to look at those elements, and we just sort of advise on the best practice that we have here in the UK.
Yeah, that idea of best practice is really interesting to me, that we felt we went somewhere with a kind of best in class, this is how we do things, and then people who were also best in class in the US just poked at it a lot. Why do you do that? Why do you do that? Why do you do that? And actually sometimes kind of coming up with the answer, I don't think so. I think there might be a better way that we can do things. Have you already experienced that, Clay, here, that people are kind of starting to poke around at why you do things and it's made you question anything?
No, I mean, I think we're still a little early on. I think if you look at some of the U.S. brands that have come here, there's been some big success. I mean, you can point to the Wingstops and some of the others. There's another brand that's coming here, Black Tap Burgers, that I think will be very successful here, coming over from the U.S. I think that, and the same vice versa, as brands come across the U.S., sometimes you come across, and I can think of a couple of brands that are hugely successful here, a Nando's or a Wagamama, that just come over there, and sometimes you think, well, they're just going to be successful in the U.S., and they're not. They haven't gotten the same traction that you would have thought that they would have gotten. There's just a different reception in the country that you land in. And so I do think that you have to talk to those people that are in those countries, and you have to be able to adapt a little bit. I mean, I expect that we'll adapt. I don't expect it to be 100% the same experience. Now, hopefully it is. It's the same brand. It's the same. This is what our partners are signing up for, and it's the same thing that you've gotten. And I expect chicken tikka marsala tacos will sell well here. But, fish and chips might not. I don't know. That might be a bit cheeky here. Is that the right word? I don't know.
We're going to bring you back next year just to find out if fish and chip tacos
I'll put the P-mix
resonated
up,
or not.
and we'll compare it to the U.S. But you have to talk to the people in the U.S. and go, okay, I thought this is what it meant. I mean, they just opened a Nando's in Dallas, Texas, and I didn't get it. Yeah. I get it. I understand that it's an amazing brand with great heritage from Johannesburg, and I walked in there with a friend, and he was like, I don't get it, And I know that's sacrilegious. I'm sorry. I am sorry. I am so sorry. But just like, okay. And I know there's like 500 or 600 of them here. Yeah. But it just, it's kind of like, okay, how does that adapt to the U.S.?
Robbie Eindhoven's calling Peter now, really angry.
Sorry, Peter.
Last minute, so maybe if I just make this an open question, but thinking about Ian's question on the last panel, which is, do you have an experience of what investors think about international? Is it additive? Does it help with your multiple, the white space thing? What's your view on how it's seen by the money?
It's additive. I mean, I've got private equity guys. We've laid it out as part of a long-term plan. They look at it as as a long-term plan, as part of our 5-year plan. It's not a have to, but it is a nice to have.
Yeah, I mean, similarly, it's always been in our plans. One of our backers is McQuinn, and we've seen some brilliant transactions from them in the last few years with Big Mama and Sticks and Sushi. So, you know, that ability to cross borders certainly adds value, as well as the white space you mentioned earlier.
Yeah, as I said at the start, really, whether it's current stakeholders or future investors, they're going to want to know what the story is. They want to know that we understand our brands, and if we're out of white space here, then we need to find other territories to push into. I don't have any experience of that yet, but definitely that's the hypothesis. So yeah, it also opens up a different community of potential investors, I think. And I know that was something you guys were thinking about with the US play as well, that lots of people have been bitten and have got a bit shy in the investment community here in the UK. So let's talk to some people in the big wide world and see what they make of it all.